Integrale. What does that word mean to you? Well, to me it's more than just a car. It's everything that I love about rallying, about Italian performance cars, about homologation specials. 6 times consecutive World Rally champions in the constructors. 4 times World Drivers champions in the World Rally Championship. 2 with Mickey Biasion on at the wheel, and 2 with someone who's a real personal idol of mine, the one and only Juha Kankkunen. And now here I am in Wales, driving a car with a Juha button. But no, really, a Juha button. This is driving an Integrale Group A on the road. So this is the Maturo Stradale. It's the work of a Dutch company with up to 25 years experience with preparing Lancias for rallying. And while you might see it as a resto mod, I don't think that really sums it up properly. Because this is, although a car with some very, very subtle modernisation, and there are very, very minor styling tweaks which we'll come on to in a bit, that's not really what defines the project. This car is about using 1990s rally technology to make a road car drive like your inner Gran Turismo playing personality might think an Integrale drives. It's about getting that real Group A experience on the road. Of course, all Group A rally cars are road legal. But what they've tried to do with the Stradale is take the very best bits of the Group A experience, that emotion, that performance, that driver involvement, and combine that with a bit of the bespoke and luxury finishings that are typical of a resto mod. You can have it whatever colour you want. You can have a whatever interior finish you want. And they've really looked at every last single detail to try and make this a truly bespoke product. For example, these door openers here, well, they look exactly the same as the ones in the poor old ancient Delta, but they're not plastic anymore. They're machined from billet aluminium, and it's that kind of attention to detail that really marks the Stradale out.
Let's start with the body. Stradales begin life as either original 16-valve or Evolution road-going Integrales that Maturo then completely dismantle. Rust and indeed chassis cracking are endemic in these cars, with Maturo finding some real horrors along the way, especially if the car has been modified with a much firmer suspension setup. Once that's done, the chassis is vapor blasted after stripping, and once the bad horrors have been dealt with, it's then reinforced with over 250 additional welds and plates. The custom designed roll cage is then added before the whole shell is primed, ready for painting. A further option is the full carbon fibre body, which this green car has, reducing the weight of the car down to 1,220 kilos. Just to be clear, that's the panels, not the overall structure of the car. You can reduce that further still if you specify the Corsa pack, which removes the rear seats and uses thinner glass amongst various measures.
It looks just like an Integrale, doesn't it? And you know what? Well, that's the point. Maturo didn't want to mess with the aesthetics of the original because, let's face it, it's such a big part of this car's appeal. However, there are some subtle differences. First of all, have a look at the door. You can really see a carbon weave there in the paint. This car is actually a gorgeous dark green, but without the sun on it, it kind of looks black. These little vents here, well, they're functional now. They're not on the standard road car. These mirrors are moulded on the original Group A rally mirrors. They're still work in development a little bit. Look towards the back of the car, that's a Group A fuel filler. The rear wing is fixed now in that position. It's not adjustable like the original car, and you can see the side supports have the little M logo.
On the rear tailgate, there's a crease across the boot, and that's been pushed up slightly to be in line with the rear lights, and those rear lights have been modernised as well. The wheels, well, there's a nice little geeky story about those. The 16-valve road car had 4 wheel nuts, the Evos had 5 wheel nuts, but the Group A rally cars, they always had 4, and that's why this car's got 4, even though it's an Evo. These are LED headlamps, far more effective than the original, always a good thing. The big blocky orange indicators, they've gone. There's a modern indicator unit behind the mesh. Talking of the mesh, that's all uniform now rather than being different types on the original car. And this carbon piece here, well, that extends under the engine, protecting like a sump guard. So as you can see, a lot of little differences. All together, they add up to a car with its own unique flavour. It's much the same story on the inside. Once inside, first thing that really strikes you is these seats. Now, they're mounted much lower than a standard Integrale, and that really helps the driving position because you tend to sit quite high in an Integrale, I think, and being quite tall, I always feel like I'm almost peering out underneath the windscreen rail. This colour inspired by the Delta S4 Stradale. If you've ever seen a picture of one of those inside, you'll see the reference. Abarth 2-stroke steering wheel. It's a really good rally-esque driving position. The pedals are quite flat, but you soon get used to that. Gear shift, obviously, here, this lovely exposed mechanism here with this kind of casting on the top. Hydraulic handbrake. You have to release it with a toggle switch here, but obviously when you're up and running, you can just give that a yank if you want to get the rear axle to come round. The dials, well, they've got the Maturo logo on them, but they're essentially what was fitted to the Group A car. The rest of the interior, pretty basic instrumentation really, as you'd expect of a competition car, but the way it works, it's got a lovely kind of tactile feel to it. The all-important U-Haul button doesn't do anything on this car as of yet, but the idea is once they have the dog box in the car, you'll be able to run 400 horsepower, and hitting dear old U-Haul there will liberate that power. Other than that, what really dominates the cabin, once you take a look around, is this roll cage. It's a really serious piece of work. One piece that is removable is this bar, because without taking that out, sitting in the back is going to be rather tricky indeed. Other than that, it's recognisable as the old Delta, but there are a lot of changes to materials. There's all this carbon, this Alcantara. As I mentioned, the door opener is now billet aluminium instead of plastic. The switchgear is pretty basic. It's functional, but it's clearly been made with a lot of attention to detail.
The engine in the Stradale is similar to that used in Maturo's Group A rally car recreations, including its steel conrods, forged pistons, a Group A turbocharger, and one of the few concessions to modernity, a modern, fully programmable ECU. Building the car this way, with period modifications, does inevitably mean there's more turbo lag than you might find in a modern performance turbocharged car, but it's truly authentic to how the original would have felt. As we'll see, the Stradale can be upgraded in all the key departments to full Group A specification, and the engine is no different. The changes are then largely to the cylinder head and the camshafts, and take the Stradale's output up from 360 to around 400 brake horsepower.
Obviously, the first thing you notice is the volume levels. I mean, it is a noisy car to be in. It does feel, if not quite rally car levels of sound, not far short. I would say we're talking 80%. I mean, obviously, it's an immensely visceral experience right from the off. The driving position can be tailored to any customer, but it still has that familiar Italian Lancia Integrale driving position. I don't mind it. The steering wheel's not as flat as it is on the standard car, and you can get this real close to the wheel rally driving position. It's really, really good. Pedals are quite flat, but you soon get used to it. For heel and toe, you just can't help it, literally. I said to myself I was going to be sensible and just talk to the camera, but yeah, Sorry about that. Anyway, I can tell you the clutch is really aggressive. It's quite noisy when you've got the pedal depressed, and Maturo are looking at installing one that's quieter and a little bit more tolerant, should we say. Personally, I don't mind it. I think it really fits the character of the car well. Steering, really nicely weighted. Not quite as quick from the straight ahead on turning as you might expect, but just really, it is beautiful. The feedback is absolutely fantastic. In fact, on the options list, there's the Carlos Sainz steering rack. I think that's possibly the best name for an option I have ever seen on any options list. Anyway, this dates back to '93 when Sainz had that ill-fated year with the Jolly Club team and developed a quicker ratio steering rack.
As you might imagine, the Integrale's drivetrain is substantially upgraded to cope with the additional forces being put through it. Drive shafts are strengthened and plated discs front and rear replace the standard car's torsion rear fitment. And as you guessed it, you can have the full Group A stage spec as well from the options list. As for the brakes, the Stradales use the setup developed by Maturo for their non-FIA compliant rally cars, which means 335mm front discs with 272mm rears. These come with upgraded pads and hoses, of course, but feel like you need to stop like Didier Auriol on the Calder Turini, and there's Maturo's re-engineered Abarth Group A WRC setup, which this car has. You get Group A Abarth uprights, wishbones, hubs, bearings, and of course the brakes themselves. And oh yes, it costs €35,000 plus taxes.
When we think about the Integrale, we think about a lot of things. And of course, like any Group A car, what you see with the road car is a long way from what the reality of the all-conquering, flame-belching Group A competition version was. Now, the Integrale is no different to anything else. Escort Cosworth, STI Impreza, Celica GT4, they were all the same. The Group A car was an incredibly bespoke, very advanced for its time bit of kit, probably costing 8 or 9 times the price of the road car, and built by some of the finest motorsport engineers in the business. Now, why am I saying this? Well, the point is this: drive a standard Integrale today, and yes, it's a great car. There's the romance of it. It's a very emotional, emotive experience. But it shows its age. Of course it does. All old cars do. There's nothing wrong in that. As long as you approach it with that mindset, it's fine. This isn't a personal attack on the Integrale. I love the Integrale. I love everything about it. It's a wonderful car, but it's also an old car. Technology moves on. And I think the key thing here is that there's a whole generation of people who perhaps form their impression of the Integrale from driving it on computer games like Gran Turismo and watching footage of the rally ones. And if you're expecting the road car to be like one of those, you are probably going to be disappointed, which is exactly where this car comes in. The gear change is just delicious. You've got this really high set gear lever here, right near the steering wheel. Change gear really quickly. The motor, well, there is some lag. It feels quite old school actually, which Maturo used the original turbo, so I guess that's no surprise. Rebuild the inside for better response, but the character of the car is kind of as you would imagine. It's very, very boost heavy. Boost to about 1.7 bar apparently. A lot more than the standard road car ever did, obviously, to get that 360 brake horsepower. But I think the biggest thing you notice, I mean, this car's on Michelin Pilot Sport 4S's, so not a particularly aggressive or sticky tyre, but the car just feels like it's like a cat right up on all 4 paws, literally on tiptoes at every corner. You turn the wheel, the whole thing just moves, it just wants to change direction. It's so involving, and it feels so enthusiastic. And that's the thing, you just literally cannot drive anywhere without, shall we say, a certain amount of verve and enthusiasm. It's just absolutely physically impossible. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't. I mean, the grip levels of the traction are amazing. You can definitely guess it was on a stickier tyre than this. Oh, the pedals are so good for heel and towing. Chuck it in. It's a tiny bit of body roll. I've got the damping set about halfway. Although that's not really meant for comfort. It's a motorsport setup, so it's for fine tuning. It's not about getting a comfortable road setting and then a track setting. It's just about fine tuning.
The Maturo Stradale is as fascinating as it is downright gorgeous and desirable. I mean, it looks and feels like an Integrale, it even smells one. But just like those Group A rally cars of over 30 years ago, and look, this is the key point, it doesn't drive anything like the standard road-going Integrale. Sure, the essence remains, but the brutally effective way it can fly down a road and the concentrated hit of adrenaline it provides, the sheer physicality and the precise demands it makes on a driver, well, they're pure Group A rally car, and that's like nothing else. Yes, well, you probably won't be surprised to hear that the Stradale costs from, wait for it, €340,000 plus taxes. But look, what resto mod ever seems to start at less than €300,000? To be honest, that just seems to be what these things cost. It's a rich man or woman's world. You just have to consider the man hours, the components and the craftsmanship that go into each one of these cars, and believe me, there aren't going to be many of them made. Let's face it, this is the Integrale you always dreamed of owning and driving, and for that alone, it has to be worth an awful lot of money.